Thank you, Billy. Welcome back. Thanks for your indulgence. We will return to statewide, and I think item 5.1, Mr. Ainsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is item 5.1, and this is a continuation of our speaker series on sea level rise adaptation across the state. And so I'm going to turn it over to Alex Yee, an analyst in our statewide planning division, formerly with our Long Beach office, who I pulled into the statewide planning unit. Alex, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. The next item is 5.1 on sea level rise adaptation planning, and we do have a staff presentation. If we could have that pulled up, please. Thank you. For the past 5 meetings, as the commission has moved around the state, statewide staff has been presenting sea level rise vulnerability in each area. In December, staff provided updates on sea level rise vulnerability here in Los Angeles County and also Ventura County, focused on vulnerable beaches, wetlands, and habitat. We know that as sea level rises, beaches will narrow due to a phenomenon known as coastal squeeze. Even today, as shown in this photo, areas that are typically wide beaches are now impassable at high tide. This photo was taken about a month ago during king tides here at the Belmont Shore in Long Beach. So today we want to look at sea level rise planning through a slightly different lens than we typically have, and that lens is environmental justice and equity. Staff will discuss ongoing commission efforts and highlight remaining challenges, and then the commission will have the opportunity to hear from 2 guest presenters about potential opportunities to address these challenges through regional adaptation planning and targeted community outreach. Can I have the next slide, please? The commission has long acknowledged the connection between sea level rise vulnerability and environmental justice. The Commission's sea level rise guidance recognizes the disproportionate impact that sea level rise will have on communities with limited capacity to adapt. The Commission's environmental justice policy, as we heard this morning, similarly recognizes that beach loss and loss of coastal access will predominantly disadvantage inland residents, particularly in areas projected to face increasingly extreme heat due to climate change. The EJ policy notes that taking an environmental justice approach to the coastal policy requires a fundamental rethinking of who is connected to the coast and how. Thus, in addition to discussing areas vulnerable to inundation due to sea level rise, staff will also briefly present information related to similar and related climate impacts and social vulnerability. Could I have the next slide, please? So Los Angeles County contains 101 miles of mainland shoreline, which includes many sandy beaches like Malibu, Santa Monica, Manhattan, and Hermosa beaches. Low-lying canals in Venice, Bayona and Los Cerritos wetlands, and vulnerable development here in Long Beach, particularly in East Long Beach, such as Belmont Shore and Naples. Can I have the next slide, please? While sea level rise is a major climate concern on the coasts, another concern in inland areas is extreme heat. This map depicts the coincidence of extreme heat and social vulnerability, with higher vulnerability shown in darker red. The number of extreme heat days is only projected to increase due to climate change, exacerbated by the urban heat island effect. For inland residents, access to the coast to escape the heat will be increasingly important in the coming decades, just as sea level rise threatens to reduce access. The next slide, please. This map, which overlays the social vulnerability to environmental hazards with sea level rise vulnerability, shows areas with high vulnerability depicted in darker red, located predominantly in inland areas. Many of these residents do not live in coastal cities and may not have the opportunity to participate in sea level rise adaptation planning as part of our LCP update process. Next slide, please. With over 10 million residents, which is around 26% of the state, and I appreciate Commissioner Gold's comment about the meat population midpoint being here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles County is the largest in the nation by population and one of the most diverse counties in California. There are appreciable divides between the coastal and inland parts of the county in terms of economic, social, and climate vulnerability. However, often conversations about sea level rise can center on properties and development directly threatened by erosion or inundation. But inland residents are also coastal users and should have the right to participate in planning its future. Next slide, please. Regional planning provides a forum to emphasize connections between sea level rise and other climate impacts like extreme heat. Many cities, counties, and MPOs are undertaking climate adaptation planning on the regional level. Individual cities may also benefit from regional planning from the connections drawn between climate impacts, for example, by providing additional ways to frame connected climate issues and communicate about interrelated climate impacts. There will be more and more opportunities to participate in regional planning as a forum for the Commission to engage partners on the impacts of sea level rise and align processes at the local and regional levels. Now, staff would like to turn the presentation over to Natalie Hernandez of Climate Resolve, who will speak about ongoing climate adaptation planning efforts in Los Angeles County. Natalie will be followed by Allison Spindler Ruiz from the City of Long Beach, who will share examples and lessons from the city's targeted and inclusive climate planning outreach. Following their presentations, staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Oh, it's actually the one that says CCC presentation. I think it's that one, correct. Great, thank you. Hi, Commissioners. My name is Natalie Hernandez, and I'm here on behalf of Climate Resolve, a nonprofit organization that I work for, here to present a snapshot of climate planning efforts in Los Angeles County in California. My presentation will focus on how there can be opportunities for regional collaboration and integration with local coastal programs, while taking into consideration the various climate planning efforts that are already going on. Let me take a step back and tell you a little bit about myself and Climate Resolve. I'm a resident born and raised in Long Beach, actually in Councilmember Aranga's district. And I got involved in the environmental movement because my mom, for a long time, worked at an elementary school next to a freeway that was very impacted with air pollution. And at Climate Resolve, we believe that climate change is going to exacerbate these issues and that it's a global problem, however, many impacts are local. Climate Resolve communicates how climate change will affect us in Southern California and what opportunities we have to empower people on a relatable level. We know negative news turns people away from the conversation, and most people need to know how climate change affects them personally and the solutions available. Therefore, Climate Resolve leads community projects, like installing roofing and surface designs to reduce heat to help cool down a neighborhood, as well as helping school districts capture stormwater. At our heart, we are an advocacy organization pushing for climate legislation at state and local levels, like advocating for funding to help people bike, walk, or take public transit in their neighborhoods. We organize policy and science events on forward-thinking topics such as wildfire preparedness and insurance. We also do outreach in communities on behalf of utility companies like LADWP and Southern California Edison to connect people with rebates. Lastly, we help coordinate regional science and planning efforts, which is one of the reasons I'm here today to talk to you all. Here are a few recent state resources on climate adaptation planning. The first you're probably very familiar with. I brought it. It's a crosswalk booklet about coastal hazard resilience planning in California, developed by you all at the Coastal Commission, alongside NOAA, the U.S. Geological Survey, OPR, Cal OES, OPC, the State Coastal Conservancy, and FEMA. What's nice about this booklet is that it's easy to read and gives an overview of types of plans that touch on coastal issues, such as local hazard mitigation plans, adaptation plans, general plans, and of course, the local coastal program. The California Adaptation Planning Guide is a more in-depth resource to equip all local governments, not just coastal communities, with what's needed to adopt long-term climate adaptation approaches. This guide references the latest adaptation tools and planning methodologies, incorporates findings from the latest climate science, and has best practices on integrating equity into the local planning processes. CalOES, OPR, Placework, ICF, and Climate Resolve were involved in the creation of this guide. A draft is currently on the CalOES website, and a final will be released in April 2020. The last picture in this slide is the California Adaptation Clearinghouse, or resilientca.org. It is the one-stop shop to find all California-related climate adaptation and resilient resources, like data, legislation, and case studies. I should mention that the California Adaptation Planning Guide will be integrated into this website at the end of the year. These are the first couple of resources I'm going to highlight for the LA region. First, the Regional Adapt LA, a tool for coastal impacts planning in the Los Angeles region, came out of the USCC grant as a multi-year effort to link local coastal jurisdictions and develop a community of practice. It was funded by the state between 2014 and 2019 and involved local cities from Long Beach to Malibu, 11 local municipalities, Los Angeles County, and 6 supporting organizations. It increased collaboration among coalition partners and increased use of the best available science. As a result, many cities are making significant progress in evaluating potential strategies. It served as an early jumping off point for the vulnerability assessment done by Santa Monica for their land use plan and the Venice land use plan. Additionally, expert consultants were brought in to model shoreline change, coastal erosion, and coastal retreat under projected future climate scenarios. So this effort was integrated into the work led by U.S. Geological Survey to develop the coastal modeling system, also known as COSMOS, for Southern California. Then on the left and the right here, the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Actions and Sustainability, or LARC, is a membership network of local and regional decision makers, ensuring that a sustainable Los Angeles County is prepared for climate change. In 2016, LARC released the Climate Action Framework, which synthesized mass information on climate change science and mandated state policies. It provides potential actions in a clear and concise way so that local practitioners can make wise choices and investments most appropriate for their specific community and collectively for Los Angeles. Particularly, it has a section on ocean and coastal resources. The other two resources that I'm highlighting for the LA region are the Gateway Council of Governments, or Gateway COG, which created a climate action planning framework, and then the SCAG has also created a regional climate adaptation framework. For the Gateway COG framework, they helped local jurisdictions develop voluntary climate action plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in their communities. The CAP framework also includes an adaptation toolkit and is intended to help individual communities with economic development, public health, air quality, climate resiliency, equity, and jobs. This resource has been particularly helpful for the smaller cities in the Gateway COG region who are struggling to wrap their heads around climate change. Additionally, over the past year, SCAG has been putting together the Regional Climate Adaptation Framework for 6 counties and 191 cities so that they can all work together to plan and prepare for the impacts of sea level rise, extreme heat, wildfires, and other climate-related issues. This framework is expected to be released at the end of this month, February 2020. So this slide helps drive through that more regional collaboration is needed because each year there are climate planning-related laws that are making mandates and funding programs to do the type of work that I just presented on, alongside all the other work being done by the Coastal Commission on the LCPs. Some of the major laws that have passed related to climate adaptation are SB 379, which requires communities to incorporate climate change in the safety element of their general plan. SB 246, which directed OPR to create Integrated Climate Adaptation and the Resiliency Program, or ICARP, which is designed to develop a cohesive and coordinated effort across state and local and regional levels. And one main component of this program is the resilientca.org website that I showed earlier. SB 1482 requires state agencies to promote the use of climate adaptation strategies to inform planning decisions and ensure that state investments consider climate change impacts when developing infrastructure. And lastly, SB 1000 requires an environmental justice element, goals and policies to be adopted in the general plan, ensuring that the most vulnerable communities to climate change and other environmental hazards are protected. So I gave a snapshot of state, LA region, and state and LA region resources, as well as recent climate planning laws. Now I want to talk about the opportunities for more collaboration. First, there's a role for nonprofit, network, and academic organizations like Climate Resolve, LARC, and USC Sea Grant to be a boundary organization or liaison in these planning efforts, to bring various stakeholders together to frame climate change holistically and to push creative thinking amongst government. For example, Climate Resolve has led several climate symposia in partnership with the CEC, USC Sea Grant, and other partners to disseminate research on climate science, including sea level rise. Climate Resolve is also actively assisting local governments to get funding for climate planning. For the Council of Governments and Metropolitan Planning Organizations like Gateway COG and SCAG, their role can be to administer climate planning grants. SCAG already does this with the heat island reduction plans that include urban greening and cool streets. And then COGS and MPOs can also facilitate the creation of region-wide planning resources, such as what was done with the Climate Action Planning Framework for 28 of the member cities in the Gateway COG. Lastly, the role of the Coastal Commission, you all, can be to figure out a way to have LCPs be flexible to climate adaptation planning processes and to streamline LCPs with efforts already going on. On one end, some jurisdictions find it challenging to be on specific grant timelines with LCPs. And on the other hand, the Coastal Commission might see that adaptation planning processes already going on might be too broad or don't get the specificity and actual adaptation measures that an LCP requires. Therefore, there needs to be a way to work more closely together on this and not have adaptation planning be a separate effort from the LCP. With that, I will take questions at the end, and I'm going to pass it over to the wonderful Allison Spindler, who is going to present on the Long Beach Climate Action and Adaptation Plan.
Thanks, Natalie. Good morning, commissioners. It's great to be with you all here this morning. Thanks for coming to our beautiful city of Long Beach. And I've got the other presentation. Yes. My name is Allison Spindler Ruiz, and I'm a planner here at the City of Long Beach. I'm the project manager for developing our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and I've been asked to focus on sharing with you all some of the strategies that we've developed to facilitate a community-centered, inclusive process for developing our CAP. This first slide here, you'll see some of the faces of residents of Long Beach who've been involved in developing our CAP so far. We've reached an estimated 10,000 Long Beach residents in the process through a variety of events with a focus on reaching young people, communities of color, and others most impacted by climate change here in our city. And we do that by having, it's not rocket science, but it starts with science, using a process that looks at how climate change is already impacting our communities and how it's projected to impact them further in the future, and then using that information to develop a preliminary engagement strategy. Once we did that, we conducted what's called an equity assessment, using a tool from the Government Alliance on Race and Equity to understand who would be impacted, how we could reach people that are traditionally left out of the planning process. And we worked with partners such as our Health Department and Parks Department, who do tend to work with communities more impacted and vulnerable communities in Long Beach on a day-to-day basis to come up with multilingual strategies for partnering with existing initiatives and ways to reach people that our planning process doesn't always do traditionally. And that starts by meeting people where they are, whether it's at existing community festivals or with community organizations, relationship building, trying different things, and not being afraid to fail, and then co-learning with the community and continuing to iterate. I mentioned it starts with data, so we were very careful in developing an independent scientific working group who advised our climate action planning process. You can see the members listed on the left hand of the slide, and they include academics, local experts, and everything from sea level rise to air quality and heat island effect. And we required that there be someone that had published at least some information on equity issues in Long Beach as part of that scientific working group. And they helped advise what data we collected, our methodologies, and to help validate those. I think most of you are familiar with Long Beach, but just to give you a quick context, you see here a part of our beautiful coast. It's 52 square miles. We're almost 500,000 residents. We're ranked one of the most walkable and bikeable cities in the country. But we recognize that although we're an extremely diverse community, we're also a very segregated community, like many communities across the country. I know you're all familiar with Cal and Bioscreen. The map on the top left shows the Cal and Bioscreen impacts for Long Beach. You can see that in Central, West, and North Long Beach in red are highest on the cumulative disadvantage index, and that you can actually go 2.2 miles and be in the 95 to 100th percentile, which means you're worse off than 95 to 100% of census tracts, and in 2 miles be in the 10 to 15th top percent for the least vulnerability. That's existing environmental justice issues. If you look then at the top center map, extreme heat vulnerability, based on climate change data, we see those same communities in red. Layer on that social vulnerability to climate change. Again, you see almost the same pattern. And on the bottom left, percentage of white residents in our community, the darker the red, the more white residents, and you see almost an exact inverse pattern. And then on the bottom right, where our youngest residents live, you can see that the darker the red, the more proportion of children under the age of 10. So it's our youngest people that will not only live with these issues the longest, but are living in the areas most impacted by climate change. So we have substantial impacts related to sea level rise as well, as was mentioned. But and this is 2030 king tide and storm-based flooding potential. Here's a 2050 map. You can see most of those flooding impacts are in more well-off parts of our city. Although West Long Beach is there as well, it's projected to be protected by the port adaptation planning work already underway. So going back to extreme heat, just like it's true across the globe, in Long Beach, extreme heat is projected to have the most severe life and safety impacts of any climate change impact. For us in Long Beach, nearly 275,000 of our residents are in the highest heat vulnerability zone. Heat can lead to heat-related illness, injury, and death. It worsens air quality, and it's particularly dangerous for children, older adults, people with respiratory disease, and those who work outdoors. It can lead to missed work days, school days, damage to roads, highways, and rail. And you can see on the bottom left for Long Beach, historically we've had 4 extreme heat days a year. By 2050, we're expecting somewhere between 11 and 16, and by 2100 up to 37. But it's actually not a future problem, this is a present problem. If you look in the last 10 years, we've averaged almost 8.5 extreme heat days, not 4. And if you can see which year we had the most number of extreme heat days, it was 2015. And in 2015, during a heat wave, we had a week-long power outage that left many of our residents without power. You can see some excerpts from Twitter here on the left. And really for everyone, issues that are here today are more front and center, but particularly our communities most vulnerable are dealing with how to get through today and tomorrow. And so framing climate change as an issue of today, not just the future, has been an important part of our message. You can also see on the right, we had a really intense rainstorm a couple of years ago that made it hard for our 911 responders and others to reach residents. Again, those more intense storms leading to impacts today. So when we went out and started talking to people about these issues, one group of older adults who invited us to their member meeting were the Long Beach Gray Panthers. They're a great group. And when we started mentioning the heat wave and the power outage, they actually had stories. Many of them were in that power outage and lived for a week without ability to get up and down their elevators, without keeping their medication or food refrigerated. And they wanted to share their stories. So after we started talking, they came to us and wanted to co-plan an event. And actually, in his role as council member, Commissioner Uranga here co-sponsored that event called Extreme Heat, Staying Safe in the Face of Climate Change. And we talked about climate change impacts, including things like access to the coast, but we also talked about day-to-day impacts, like how to deal with the health impacts, how to keep people safe, how to recognize heat stroke, and how to be certified for emergency response. We also mentioned how young people are impacted by climate change disproportionately. Of course, young people are going to inherit this climate crisis. And so we've worked very intentionally in developing relationships with school groups, with our school district. We're a partner in the school science fair at Long Beach Unified. And last year, the winners of the science fair got to showcase their work at our Climate Fest event. We also work with youth leadership groups and initiatives who have done class projects, created Instagram accounts, and are helping us get the word out across Long Beach. If you remember the map before about how communities of color are disproportionately impacted, Long Beach is about 40% Latino. And when we thought about engagement with the Latino community, we started by meeting people where they are, going to events like festivals and events in the park. And then we developed a partnership with a local organization called Latinos in Action. And we were hosted at their fair where we gave away air purifiers and had our Spanish-speaking staff participate. And after that, we built enough trust where they invited us to come co-host an event with them. They made recommendations such as using the Loiteria game, sort of like bingo if you're not familiar, to go over CAP concepts. We also highlighted examples that are working around adaptation planning in Latin America to uplift what's working. And continue to build that trust and ask people, what their input is around climate change and what we can do. Similarly, Long Beach has the largest Cambodian population outside of Cambodia. And so when we were developing a strategy with working in the Cambodian population, it started again with going to meet people where they are. And we have Khmer-speaking staff here in Development Services who helped us do that. We would go to things like business assistant workshops and health fairs, and eventually we're invited to have a table at Cambodian New Year. We also created an advertisement shown on the right, and we were advised to do a really interesting translation approach where we were told to translate the headlines in Khmer, but keep the detail in English because most older Cambodians read Khmer only, and most younger Cambodians only read English. We're also advised to work through a local Khmer TV station and to create animated videos. And those were some interesting tips that we got. Finally, it's not just about events. Taking an environmental justice approach is also about what goes in the plan. So to us, it's really important to recognize these environmental justice issues in the plan itself. This is an excerpt from the introduction of our draft plan, recognizing the historic injustices and inequities that are still with us today, and how that creates a geography of differentiated risk around climate change, and the role that government and planning has played in that. How we communicate also matters. So on the left, you could see a typical notice a city might give. And on the right, you can see a postcard we sent out to every resident in our sea level rise vulnerability area for the year 2050, which says, your house is in the sea level rise vulnerability area. Here's a link to the map, and invited them to a panel to discuss. You can imagine we got a good turnout. We had almost 300 residents attend, and it ironically rained really hard and the parking lot flooded. We had Dr. Schubel from the aquarium come speak about sea level rise and the long-range need to retreat. We also had a local architect come talk about what we can do in the interim and how to adapt. And then I spoke about sort of the policy and public side of it. But as we close, I want to mention not everyone wants to come to a panel. Could you advance the slide? Oh, okay, froze. Okay. Well, not everyone wants to come to a panel. My next slide was going to show a picture of our Climate Fest, where we took over a parking lot in our sea level rise vulnerability zone, and we actually hired a local chalk artist who chalked up the sea level rise projections on the parking lot, and then we had a collaborative art project where everyone would add to that piece, and it helped raise awareness while using art and creativity to do something a little bit lighter, because not everyone is ready to take a really deep and hard conversation about climate change. And just as we close, wanted to make that point that it's about not just the process, but transparency of how the process leads to different policy, and how we've been very transparent in what community feedback leads to in the draft plan, as well as focusing on capacity building, not just engaging people for the sake of checking the box, but how do we build those planning abilities so that they can continue to be in the process, because this is just the beginning. We know we have a lot of work to do, and that it's going to take a long time to deal with the structural and systemic inequities that we face, and that we'll need to keep working with and for the community to do it. Thank you very much.
Well done,
Oh,
thank you.
There it is, if you see on the top right, the art project.
Awesome,
Thank you.
thank you. Do we need to close, Mr. Yee, or Mr. Ainsworth?
Yeah, that concludes our presentation, and we really want to thank our speakers. I thought that was really fabulous.
You did a fantastic job, as always.
Different perspective, how we can reach out to these communities.
Thank you. I do have some slips to address the commission on this item. Aaron Berry, on behalf of the California Association of Realtors, Smart Coast, California. Welcome.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Commission for all your work. My name is Erin Berry. I live in Long Beach, and I'm a local realtor working 18 years in Los Angeles and Orange counties up and down the coast. This makes me one of 250,000 realtors in California. I'm also one of the 800 directors of the California Association of Realtors. Housing is important, which is why I'm here today. In our efforts to be constructive, the California Association of Realtors has worked hard to create an effective organization called Smart Coast California. With Smart Coast California, the California Association of Realtors are advocates for solutions to address sea level rise and its nuances throughout the state. As Californians, we're all in this together. We need to work together to find solutions as partners for all of California, both coastal and inland. Smart Coast California hopes to continue to engage with your staff and you to work together on those solutions. As a director, I personally want to thank our Smart Coast consultant here, Don Schmitz. Most importantly, we want to thank you for all your work, the work you're doing on the issues of sea level rise, and we look forward to our mutual endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sergio Macias from Smart Coast, California.
Hi there. So I've been a realtor here for 23 years.
Could you
Yes.
state your name for the record, please? Thank you.
Sergio Macias, Macias. And I've been a realtor here for 23 years, and I do endorse Smart Coast, California. I've been an active member of this community since relocating here from Los Angeles in 1992. I'm a graduate of the chemical engineering program at Cal State Long Beach, a graduate of Leadership Long Beach. I'm an officer of the Bluff Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm a local business owner. I've owned Hot Java for the last 15 years. I'm president emeritus of Long Beach Pride and served as a board member there for 14 years. And I want to thank all of you for your time here, the work you're doing here, and I especially want to recognize Councilmember Roberto and his wife Tanya Uranga for the continuous stewardship for diversity, for access, for the city as a whole and the environment. We at Smart Coast California want to continue to do our part to support a greater purpose, and that purpose being to work together for a long-term strategy for sea level rise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Macias. Next up is Don Schmitz with Smart Coast California. Please state your name for the record.
For the record, I'm Don Schmitz. Good morning, Commissioners. I'll make this very brief. We have been working feverishly to catch up. The California Association of Realtors formed this organization and really got going about 5-6 months ago. We've been liaisoning with your staff. We've been having conversations with the some 12 counties and cities which are actively creating their local coastal program amendments, the 40 plus which have done their vulnerability assessments. And I think that this organization with thousands and thousands of realtors who are in the trenches for so many communities are just absolutely integral to making a bridge, a conduit between the different regulatory agencies and these communities, because there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution to this. There's going to be different communities, different neighborhoods. It's really going to be that detailed. And I was very struck by the presentation today. I made a presentation to the California Association of Realtors conference last week and was discussing sea level rise and how this commission has taken a lead to come up with regulations to address this and how we had to be part of that constructive engagement to find these solutions. And one of the groups of realtors that came up to thank me for the presentation and had a lot of interest were from Bakersfield. Now, you typically don't think about a community like that really being concerned about sea level rise, but the fact of the matter is, and this is something you understand at a visceral level, which is that the coast, the 1,100 miles of the coast, is really a defining geomorphic feature for the entire state. Economically, recreational opportunities, it's where everybody wants to go. And the real estate community has tremendous skin in the game in regards to this. They're not just about selling houses, they're about dynamic communities, they're about commercial centers, they're about recreational opportunities. And another thing a lot of folks are realizing all over the state is that the critical infrastructure improvements, modifications, and changes that we're going to have to do are something that the taxpayers are going to have to incur the cost for across the entire state. So one of the things that I've been trying to promote is, in fact, and you heard some of the previous speakers address this, we are all in this together. None of us can ignore this. And this California Coastal Commission is out front, as well it should be, to address this particular issue. It's not the only agency, but it is quite arguably one of the most important ones. So we are trying to take these monthly staff presentations, which are very instructive, and we're trying to take them to the different organizations and local communities and distribute them and promote them so that people can be educated and can be part of the process. I want to thank you very, very much for the work that you're doing, that your staff's doing, and we're looking forward to continue to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. Next is Judith Davies. She has time ceded to her by Kathy Knight and Patricia McPherson. And just want to reiterate that this is on sea level rise.
Yes.
Okay, great,
Yes.
thanks.
Let's see if I can-
State your name for the record.
My name is Judith Davies, and I'm here speaking also on behalf of the Sierra Club, the Airport Marina Group, and Grassroots Coalition. First, I want to say that I was delighted to find the source report referred to by the Coastal Commission called, yeah, we could go to the next slide. Yeah, this report that I looked at and started, reading through, and it was just, there was so much information and so informative and new, and it was very positive for me to have that kind of input, and I just kept reading it, and I just want to thank you so much for all the work that went into that, and everybody that was involved in that, because it's very positive, reinforcing that there are ways of dealing with sea level rise, and where we are with this, we have so many questions and concerns and worries, so thank you for that. Reading through it and comparing maps, seeing the variety and makeup of coastal areas and how they can be protected and or mitigated with these rapid changes. It's an invaluable source, and I'm relieved that it exists, and I'm thankful to all of those who put it together, and I will refer to it very often and spend time rereading it. The assessments of our coast, giving the projected 5-foot sea level rise, they use to calculate conditions and changes that may occur, with all the maps going all the way down the coast. My concern is, of course, in our area, the Ballona wetlands and what sea level rise would do to that, and also potential project that is being presented in this final EIR for the Ballona wetlands restoration. I was struck by something I read quickly through it on page 85. Quote, let's see the next slide. Here, managers are becoming increasingly aware of the complex and dynamic impacts to sediment and water flow dynamics on coastal habitats, and are developing creative management strategies to mitigate these impacts. Examples of practices to manage in place for resilience range from the manual placement of sediments, thin layer sediment augmentation, the removal of levees around the estuarine marshes and dams upstream, improving flushing dynamics on the marsh, etc. So, all of that feeds into more information as to how to approach wetlands with all the complex dynamics and forces that are, always in motion and changing. Struggling with this FEIR that finally was released in December, it seemed to me that in spite of its enormous length, something like 5,000 pages, which I, am dealing with piece by piece, but very small pieces, I'm much more delighted and encouraged by reading your information. This seems to remain largely the same as it was presented over 10 years ago, with no really the predetermined choice of turning the wetlands largely into a salt marsh with full tidal inflow from the ocean. This makes no sense to me today with sea level rise certainty. The plan is based on a static engineered structural development, which seems to be more designed as a flood control basin or something, but I don't see how that will work either, really. If anything, it makes it more condensed, more possible for a sort of bore effect to go up the levees of Ballona Creek, and maybe affect even people further up the line, like in Culver City and so on, where I know that I've taken photographs myself of some of those areas and streets going across and bridges. They need reinforcing, and certainly with the berms and so on that they're suggesting with the other plan, it's going to affect all the way up the line. The wetlands are extremely important in the process of reducing global, we could go to the next slide. There are only like 3 slides. The wetlands are extremely important in the process of reducing global warming and climate change, we know. Wetlands capture and store in their plants, sediments, and soils 4 times more CO2 than even terrestrial forests. 90% of California's coastal wetlands have been destroyed, and Ballona is one of the last seasonal freshwater coastal wetlands. This, as I call big dig out, would not only take 10 years and cost $200 million, initial estimates, and would be releasing large amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere with the bulldozing and digging out, with the removal of these soils. It is also complicated by SoCalGas underground storage and extraction facilities. This is coming up. Extraction facilities that produce more methane and toxic gases, which would be released as these gas migrate and So CalGas has extended their underground storage beyond what they're initially permitted to do under their CUP. So it would seem to me that the area was slowly built up with silt and sediment from the combined waters that flowed from Ballona Creek, Centinela Creek, and the LA River for thousands of years, really, till the LA River was redirected and increasingly cut off from the tidal inflow, which I had pointed out in an earlier slide. So I can go down past this. I also present here a map of the LA watershed from Santa Monica Mountains running all the way down through the basin, through the aquifers that are underneath in the wetlands. So we haven't cleaned our waters that are coming down all through the watershed. And before we actually introduce water back into the Ballona wetlands or back into the ocean, we need to really take it hard and clean these storm drain waters, the pollutants and so on. It's unacceptable to allow this to happen any longer, either for the coast or for any other possibility of discharging through the wetlands. I'd also finally like to refer to a recent article here. Scientists make discovery. Let's see, that would be the next slide, I think. It's a short, small picture there. But the article is here, and I'm going to submit the entire report, presentation rather. This was published November 5th, 2019, in which the study at University of Georgia looks at eddies and swells off the coast of California, showing that these swells transport nutrients far out into the deep ocean. Then we can also conclude, most likely we are also sending vast amounts of waste, garbage, toxic chemicals far out into the deeper regions of the ocean from the coast ourselves. We can't discuss any restoration, as I said, of the wetlands till we deal with this issue. These waters could then be used, if they were suitable, to be used, the fresh water to be used to recharge the aquifers at Ballona wetlands, create new habitats, and produce a thriving fresh water wetlands with only occasional tidal inflow as it once was. It would produce the kind of buffer zone that is natural to a wetlands for flooding, and it can be allowed and also encouraged to build up higher ground over time to counter against sea level rise conditions as it may occur in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Davies. Appreciate that. Next up is Melinda Cotton. And if you could state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, my name is Melinda Cotton. I live in Belmont Shore. That's a very lovely place to live, but we're 2 blocks from the beach, so we're going to be among the first affected by climate change, and we're actually already seeing it. With the heat spells that we've had flooding in front of our house. Allison and I just talked on Monday about that. The rainstorms are coming from the extra heat, so that's important. The weather has gotten so that we installed solar on our roof so we can feel comfortable having air conditioning, which we have never needed before. So we definitely feel for the people who are coming inland to the shore to enjoy the beach and the cooler weather. And we're certainly trying to protect the beach, as I've spoken earlier. The Aquarium of the Pacific, Dr. Schubel, and the League of Women Voters and the Nature Conservancy have had so far 3, really. The League of Women Voters has had 6 climate change symposiums. They do one every spring. They have excellent speakers. They're archived on the aquarium website. So I hope that everybody will be aware of those and look at them. The last one was focused on Belmont Shore and the peninsula. And again, they were really excellent and very concerned. We hope you'll read a book called The Uninhabitable Earth. It came out last summer, has excellent research, and it's very, very scary. I would try to just briefly ask you again. I did speak yesterday morning about saving Olympic Plaza Park, which is on the beach. They have moved, the latest version of the Belmont Beach and Aquatic Center has moved the pool inland some feet. It's supposed to be on the line that supposedly the sea level rise is not supposed to go over, but there's no guarantee of that. It's happening a lot faster than any of us expect. So we're hoping, I know a gentleman earlier spoke about moving the pool to another location. We have repeatedly, and I know coastal staff has mentioned, the pool could go on the Elephant Lot. It's the convention center, has a 13-acre parking lot. The LA 28 Olympics plans to put a temporary pool there for water polo. And so why not put the Belmont pool there, which is going to be a competitive swimming and diving operation in part. And the pool would also serve Commissioner Uranga's neighborhood. So we're hoping that that would happen and that the city will see it feasible to do that. And again, thanks to all the commissioners. I know you were here at 9 a.m. yesterday morning. You went to 8 last night. And we really thank you for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cotton. I want to thank all the public speakers. Now we're going to turn it back to the commissioners for questions. First up is Commissioner Turnbull Sanders. And does anyone else like to address the issue of sea level rise?
Thank you, Vice Chair Brownsey. I really enjoyed the presentation by Ms. Hernandez, and could you say your name, the representative from Long Beach? Ms. Spindler. Both of your presentations I thought were a really good example of how local jurisdictions could involve communities that have typically been left out of the process. And Ms. Spindler, I particularly appreciated your comments about capacity building. And I think that's one of the things that often gets lost is you typically have organizations and many times environmental organizations that kind of helicopter into communities and then they help provide services and then they leave without building the internal capacity for future engagement. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Ms. Hernandez for her exemplary work in a kind of seminal piece that I use all the time called Measures Matter around the equitable distribution of public resources and how that can influence more sustainable communities, and particularly in disadvantaged communities. So excellent presentation. I just really appreciate both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up is Commissioner Gold.
Thank you. I also thought that Natalie, Allison, and Alex gave a very helpful presentation, so thank you. I would just sort of add, since Allison gave it, I'm sorry, Natalie gave a good overview of what's going on in the region, that the City of LA Green New Deal document has a lot of pertinent information related to this as well as the city's resilience plan that Lucy Jones worked on. There's a lot of good stuff in there on extreme heat. One of the things that has come out in dealing with these sorts of issues is trying to figure out where your cooling centers are in relation to your disadvantaged communities and why they did or did not get used during some of the extreme heat that occurred. It was kind of shocking how they weren't used. I mean, UCLA, we had a 112-degree day, which was pretty amazing during that time period. And it sort of opened up everybody's eyes on cooling centers and that a lot of education and cultural change needs to occur on people using them. So I'm sure you guys, that's included in there and you're giving broad overviews. I understand, but sometimes those sorts of maps are also pretty helpful in telling the story as well. One of the other things I just want to bring up is, I'm very happy that resources agency as well as OPC is working so closely with the Coastal Commission on these issues. We're trying to all get on the same page, and this came from a request from four of the commissioners to sort of lead an effort together jointly on getting about a dozen different agencies in the state on the same page of just principles to work under on sea level rise. And we're pretty far along on this, pretty shockingly, in such a short period of time. And so hopefully we'll have something to report on maybe as early as the next meeting on that. Maybe that's a little overly ambitious, but I think that would be great. And then just the last thing I did want to bring up is that in the strategic plan for California's ocean and coast, which will be voted on at the OPC meeting on the 26th, there's some pretty significant issues and targets that are in there for sea level rise, including how to use the guidance, sort of a floor for what we should be building in for resilience as early as 2050. And a number of other different issues. One of the things, because I know that social justice is such a high priority for the Coastal Commission, that I urge you to take a look at is the impacts of sea level rise on infrastructure, especially in underserved communities, and what that could mean to those communities. Because I think that's an area that we touched upon, but I think is going to become a much larger issue. And whether it's sites that have had previous pollution problems and the like that are now vulnerable to sea level rise, I think it's something to take a hard look at. And so I just encourage you to start doing that, sort of moving forward in the future. And I could go on forever, but I won't. So thanks.
Good choice, Commissioner. I just want to take just one moment of personal privilege before I ask Commissioner Rice to offer comments. Commissioner Gold referenced the statewide effort in terms of getting the agencies on the same page. I just want to shout out his work and the work of Commissioner Amanzada, who I believe with their vision, their hard work, and mostly, and so importantly on this issue, their sense of humor, really produced an incredibly effective meeting, an incredibly effective document, which is a statement of sea level rise principles for the state. So I just want to do that shout out. Next, Commissioner Rice.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the presentations this morning, and I don't know if I've been asleep for the last however many years and thinking about climate change, but it just really became so stunning to me today, especially listening, I think, to the Long Beach, the work that Long Beach is doing in it with its CAAP on the intersection. I mean, we tend to think of climate change impacts as being much more physical, sea level rise. You know, we do our sea level rise vulnerability assessments, but really there's the physical impacts, the social impacts, and the public health impacts, and the intersection of it all. And interestingly enough, the work of the Coastal Commission and access to the coast and our coastal communities are right sort of at the vortex of that, of those three, whether you live in Bakersfield or Sacramento or right on the coast. So I just appreciate, especially, I'm going to be sharing the work and the process that Long Beach is doing with my community, and I'm sure Chair Groom and I will be sharing it with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District as we think about a lot of air quality issues with regards to climate change. But I just really appreciate the presentations today.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Rice. Next up is Commissioner Uranga.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I too want to thank the individuals who came out, and the presentations were wonderful. They're very informative. I also want to thank my Long Beach community members who are out there who decided to come today and share their experiences and their thoughts on what's taking place here in Long Beach. The CAP, the Clean Air Action Plan, has been in effect now for a number of years and in development stages, and very glad to see that the the sharing of those outreach efforts that we've done have been working. I mean, I've been to a few of those. I went to the one with Dr. Schubel out at the Golden Sales Hotel about last year sometime. And unfortunately, Dr. Schubel is retiring. So we're going to have a brain drain, so to speak, with his departure. But the fight will continue on, and the educational efforts will continue on. I'm also glad to see that the realtors have mobilized. There you go. That's a good word. Mobilized to also get involved in this effort, because obviously with all the issues that we're dealing with in terms of managed retreat and everything else that's coming along with sea level rise, obviously the realtor sector of our community is going to be very much involved and included in those efforts, and being involved and engaged in this effort is going to be very important for us as well, as we get your viewpoints and your perspectives on what's taking place with sea level rise. This morning, I had the honor of interviewing our chair, Steve Padilla, on our local TV channel, Go Long Beach, and we talked a little bit about sea level rise and the effects that it's going to have, not only here in Long Beach, but up and down the coast and everywhere where there's going to be an impact on that. We're talking about, the number keeps changing as we keep going forward. Somebody mentioned about that it's coming sooner than we expected. And we're looking at when we first started this about 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about sea level rise and creating the sea level rise adaptation plan. We were looking at those days, maybe between now and 2050, that we would have maybe a 3-foot increase in sea level rise, but we're experiencing that now. So we're looking at maybe 10 feet by the time 2100 comes along. So I mean, it's much more imperative today that we start getting ourselves educated, getting ourselves aware as to what's coming down. And I especially want to thank also Ms. Hernandez for your presentation on what's going on in the city of LA. And you're a 7th District resident. All right, well, wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to just have a few brief comments, and then we're going to move to the rest of the agenda, because I know we have some commissioners with time constraints. Just quickly, also want to thank you. You are that glimmer of hope that we don't get to see often enough. So I just want to thank Ms. Hernandez and Ms. Spindler for your work. It is so critically important, and I want to thank all the people here in this room who contribute to that. But quickly, I just wanted to just mention that the Commission also has a residential planning guidance document, which is incredibly helpful planning tool for local communities, and particularly for homeowners, but it's also an educational tool. I bring that to your attention to be included as a resource. And then the Commission is working with the League and with CSAC. In fact, we have a local government planning group, Commissioner Bochco and myself, along with Director Ainsworth and Madeline Valeri on our staff, to really try to find common language, common ground. And lastly, I would love to continue a conversation with both of you, given your community work, your dedication, of your intellectual lives to this, which is the thing that we keep running into with our local governments, our cities and our counties, and the other local entities, is where does flexibility collide with resistance? And so to have your brilliance kind of bring some attention to that, and perhaps we can talk with you and you can inform us in terms of your experiences, I think that would be incredibly helpful. So with that, thank you, commissioners, for all of the comments, and then we're going to move to the main agenda. Thank you, particularly Mr. Yee, excellent job.